Good afternoon. Our first video of the year, our first particular topic, is going to deal with this brand new news that on August 11th, China devalued its yuan. And this is a surprising move. I've written here the title of the article, China Devalues Yuan in Surprising Move. It's a CNN article dated August 11th, 2015, but you could have gotten this information from a number of sources. That's just the source I chose. So it's a major change in how the yuan is allowed to adjust. The People's Bank of China is the name of China's central bank, much the way in the United States we call the central bank the Federal Reserve. And the People's Bank of China is reputed for being very authoritarian, having a lot of government control. And in fact, as they were focusing on the exchange rate, they would set a daily midpoint. And it used to be that the central bank just arbitrarily set the midpoint. The midpoint here, in case you're not following this, is the middle of the exchange rate between the Chinese renminbi and the US dollar, or the Chinese yuan. So the yuan is allowed to trade within a 2% band. So the exchange rate can be 2% up or down from whatever PBOC sets. So for the example here, assume that the market amount would be 18 cents of US money for 1 yuan. So the old way that the PBOC set this was that if they just arbitrarily out of the sky picked out that the yuan should trade at 14.818 cents, then what they do is take the midpoint of 14.818, multiply it by 2%, and that would be 0.0029. Then they would take the 14 cents, roughly, add the 0.0029, and they decide that the exchange rate could fluctuate as high as 15.11 cents. Well, you see my red mark there. Why? What caused them to set this midpoint rate? People never really got a straight answer out of the People's Bank of China. So yesterday, they announced that they were going to set the midpoint at whatever it was yesterday, and then it could fluctuate up to 2% either way. That is more significant than it sounds, because really it says once they come up with an arbitrary rate, they're not going to use it anymore. Instead, the arbitrary rate will keep carrying through in some ways, but now today's midpoint is based on yesterday's. So if today's midpoint is 0.15, let's say, and then they multiply that by 2%, come up with 0.153, then the midpoint tomorrow would be today's new calculation, 15.3 cents, times 1.02, so it can fluctuate up to 15.6 cents. So not a major change in the sense that they didn't all of a sudden become totally market-based, but all of a sudden the arbitrariness is gone. Now, yes, they're basing it on the previous arbitrary rate, but the arbitrary rate is fluctuating a bit based on the market. Now, is that enough or is that not enough? There are different schools of thought on that. So we want to point out that neither way, neither what they used to do that's arbitrary or what they've started to do would be considered a market rate exchange. We have a lot more to say about that in the class, and we'll talk about it, in the second half of the class. When China announced this, it was peculiar that it caused the yuan to devalue. So it lost 1% of its value against other currencies. So if you'd heard anything about the yuan, the thing you might have heard is that many countries had thought for some time that it was arbitrarily low anyway, because China was setting a low rate. So it was kind of surprising that when they finally allow this thing to float a little bit, they have to devalue it 1.9%. Many people think China deliberately picked a day when there was some bad news in China, and this would look to be a lower rate than it otherwise might. So we don't know then, why is the first midpoint set so low? Now, China calls this a market-based reform. And, the different countries throughout the world, different economic minds, will have to see if they agree or not. China hopes it brings a bit more respect. Currently, the International Monetary Fund does not give the yuan much respect, and so they use things like the US dollar, the Japanese peso, the English pound, and the euro. And China's hoping they may also now include the yuan as an International Monetary Fund-based currency. Not quite sure if this is enough yet. A final concern is, because China devalued the yuan 1.9%, will the other countries in the East, like Japan and Korea, feel the need to devalue their currency? And if they do, will this provoke a currency war? Currency war meaning, will everybody start devaluing currencies just to try to make imports to another country more attractive? And be sure you understood what I just said. Exporting refers to sending something out of a country to another one. Importing it means receiving the good in. So I was using the expression here that if China's exporting out to the United States is importing in from China. So the U.S. in theory likes the idea, the U.S. consumers like the idea that when things are imported from China, the yuan is devalued. Anyway, that's the issue. The yuan has been devalued, but also now it is going to be allowed to float a little bit more with the market. Let's see if it's enough. Take care.